complete package. Even though the player may not remind you of Kamara just yet, see if the plays being run for him do.
Play clock and game clock appear to be back and working. Simple toss play for the first snap for Bo Nix, and good solid gain. That's 200 yards rushing a season ago. He'll bounce it outside this time, and that should be McLaughlin, the ball carrier. Flowers in on the tackle.
Really long receivers, tall receivers.
Colts show blitz, back out of it. Ball is McLaughlin. Looking to bounce it outside. Will have the first down. Isaiah Land into the tackle, but not before McLaughlin follows the wall of blue and Mitchell. So Nix will get the start. McLaughlin. Liam Anderson gave chase, but could not get to him. On the screen, McLaughlin. Good job by Johnson to shed a
third down, and yet I think first down is the difference maker in this league. They are playing a heavy front, which I hope becomes a part of their defense.
McLaughlin by his lonesome. First down, spins away from the track.
Now, is he the quote-unquote backup running back to probably Javonte Williams? Yes, but I do wonder, Nate, when you look at the selection of plays in which McLaughlin was involved, and last year, of course, had an effective rookie season. If the idea is not going forward, that sort of Williams on the inside like Ingram, McLaughlin needing to do it here and there so he doesn't give away the play when he's on the field, but playing that kind of Camaro role. I think you saw some similarities there, even with Bo Nix at quarterback.
Yeah, I think you see some similarities. I think the difference is that, you know, the Saints were set up for, especially early on, like the Alvin Kamara that fans think of is the Alvin Kamara from probably the first 4 years that he was in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And in that particular case, for the most part, you were talking about a guy that really was on the field very consistently in terms of the percentage of the snaps that he had. All right. And then if you get to like the 5th and 6th years of his career,
right,
he got to the point where he was doing even more carries. He was becoming even more of a bell cow for the New Orleans offense. But this is a guy that's never rushed for 1,000 yards, by the way. If you just to throw that out there, folks, he's never rushed for 1,000 yards in his career. He's come close, but he hasn't done it. And the reason why is because he's a guy that is a Swiss Army knife. He's going to catch it out of the backfield in addition to running it. That is something that we know that Sean Payton would like to be able to do in this offense. I'm not sure that Jaleel McLaughlin is the answer. I think he can fill some of that role. But to the point that you just made, he's 3 inches shorter and 30 pounds lighter than Alvin Kamara. And that's going to make a difference. I'm a little less worried about the height per se, although I do think that the vision over the line is important. But it's the size to me. I mean, again, you're talking about a difference of about 30 pounds between those two.
And that makes it harder for him to get into the middle and run between the tackles with consistency.
Well, and it makes it difficult to get to yards after contact.
Right.
Things like that are important in that type of offensive play. If you're going to be, doing a little swing pass out to the outside, it's not just a matter of that spacing. Chances are somebody's going to get a hand on you. Can you get away from them? And Alvin Kamara could frequently. I need to be able to see that out of the rest of the backfield that the Broncos have. And McLaughlin's size has me concerned about that.
And it should. I mean, obviously, we're not talking, as I mentioned, it's not apples to apples. McLaughlin was undrafted, and Kamara was a third rounder, obviously. And you're talking about a guy that was at a good program at Tennessee, at least when he finished up. And so I think it isn't the same when you're talking about the players. But I think when you're talking about the style of what Sean Payton's trying to do, and Bo Nix is not Drew Brees, and Jaleel McLaughlin is not Kamara. And right now, Javonte Williams isn't even Mark Ingram during that span of time. And they certainly don't have a Michael Thomas. Cortland Sutton's promising. And then we know they definitely don't have a Jimmy Graham. So there's not a lot of the pieces there. But we do know that Sean Payton seems, quite frankly, and we saw this last year with Russell Wilson, and it was one of the issues I think that came to a head. Sean Payton has his offense. The Broncos are going to run his offense. A lot of pro coaches, and I think, quite frankly, with very good reason, take a look at the roster they have and say, all right, well, I'm going to design an offense based on what I have in the room, because the nature of pro football is you're subject to the randomness of the draft, of free agency, of the salary cap. You don't get to go around the country and say, wow, my exact offense that I like running requires a 280-pound mobile right tackle, and you just go scour the country and find one. You can't do that in the pros. Sean Payton's approach there is a little more collegiate coaching. I run this offense. If you play for me, you're going to run this offense. That's why, in part, it didn't work with Russell Wilson, but it's why it should work to a certain extent with Bo Nix. The question is, how does the talent stack up? And Nate's 100% right. They are not at the level of those Saints teams that went on to the Super Bowl, that maybe could have gone on to another Super Bowl. They're not at that level of talent, but you can see what Payton is trying to assemble. And you're right, yards after contact, maybe that's an Audric Estime that has a role in that. Maybe when you're talking about those different things, maybe they do it with three backs on the goal line. Who knows? But Payton is trying to recreate what you saw in New Orleans, not because it's some sort of trying to recapture anything. It's just because this is Sean Payton's offense. He requires players that run it, and that's why the turnover for the Broncos has been so dramatic.
Yeah, exactly. He's trying to plug in something that he knows is successful. And will you have to tweak it to the talent? Yeah, of course you will. And that is where there's going to be a little bit of a compromise. Okay, you brought up the Jimmy Graham example. Okay, you don't have that tight end.
Nope.
You're not going to be able to run
those plays out.
You're not going to be able to the same kinds of plays. Now, can you modify them? Can you sit down and say, hey, we think we want to be able to do this, but we need to be able to pull it back because of X, right? Because Dulcich can do this, because Troutman can do this, because Kroll can do this. That is where you need to see what we all hope is the intelligence and the evolution a bit of Sean Payton take place. Because if this is truly in his mind, the rebuild, if this is truly in his mind, we are doing this and it's going to take place over 2 or 3 years, he can understand that some of those plays that he wants to be able to run, or some of the pieces of his offense that he believes he can have success in the AFC West and the NFL in 2024, 25, 26 to do, that he's going to have to build up to it, that he can't just drop it in right here in 2024 and be like, yay, look, it worked. A couple of times it might. Some of those plays he might. But he doesn't have the exact back that he's looking for yet. He doesn't have the exact tight end by any stretch. He doesn't have the quarterback yet.
No.
And I mean that not in that he doesn't have the body, that he doesn't have the QB yet up here. He's not there yet. All of those things mean that he is going to have some patience, which sometimes when he's over there on the sideline and he's got that scowl.
Yeah.
He does that thing with his lips where he's like this. He looks like a guy who doesn't have any patience.
Ask Wilson about that.
And I need to know that he's got some patience and he sees the direction that this team is going, because you and I have been begging for the fans to have patience. And look, I think for a coach that has had a Super Bowl, and has had the parade and had all those kinds of things, I would be willing to bet you that sometimes it's hard to be patient. And I don't blame him. I think it would be difficult when you've experienced it to have to sit back and wait for it to come back.
I can only imagine it certainly is difficult. Broncos fans can tell you how difficult it's been. But last year, when you look at yardage from scrimmage, Javonte Williams led the way with 1,002. Cortland Sutton was 772. Jerry Jeudy third was 758. He's in Cleveland now. Samaje Perine with 593. But with only 3 starts, Jaleel McLaughlin again with no, as a rookie, 570. That's even ahead of Marvin Mims, who was a second rounder who the Broncos thought they'd be doing a little bit more with. So McLaughlin already carved out a larger spot than people had anticipated last year, including Sean Payton. And it may just be training camp and this first week of preseason, but it looks again as if Payton has found a guy that he trusts, that he likes, and he believes still has upside. Obviously, as we'll get back out to training camp on Wednesday, the Broncos are off today, but our training camp coverage brought to you by our friends at Rolling Smoke.
That's right. You're getting ready for football season, and we've talked about it many times. You want to have that watch party at the house. It doesn't do you any good if there's a watch party and you as the host are not able to watch. And that's because you're stuck in the kitchen. So let our friends at Rolling Smoke Barbecue take care of you when it comes to catering. Doesn't matter whether you're having, say, 6 people over or you're blowing this thing up and you're going to have, 26, 46, 106. Doesn't matter. They can take care of you because they have exactly what you need to make it so you can enjoy the party. All of the meats are hardwood, slow smoked. The sides are made fresh every single day. So you get what you want. You get your order together. You make a plan, right? And then you put in that order. You tell them what time you want to pick it up, what day you want to pick it up, all of those kinds of things. You get it all done, and they will take very, very good care of you. And they've got 4 locations to be able to help you out around the Denver metro area. We can talk about the Stanley Marketplace in Aurora, the Golden Mill as well, at the corner of Dry Creek and University in Centennial, right across the street from Arapahoe High School, and the newest one in Wheat Ridge. You can find the menu. You can find information on the catering. You can find those locations in case I went too fast for you. All of it at RollingSmokeBBQ.com.
Well, I'll be at that one across from Arapahoe in Centennial at some point this week, because I usually do that every week, because you can talk
That's
about
convenient to the office.
Well, Nate talked about you don't want to cook when what if you just can't, like me? Then there's even more.
Yeah. You can also dine in,
Smoke.
right? I mean, you can do that if you want to. I'm just throwing it out there because I know some of you are getting ready to throw some parties.
I would imagine so. Well, it is an interesting week for the Denver Broncos. Of course, they're off today. They will be facing the Packers at the tail end of the week for their joint practices. But we are also not all that far away from the debut of the University of Colorado's football program. That will be on the 29th, just 2 days from Thursday. And up there in Boulder, over the course of the media day, a little bit ago, Deion Sanders had a very interesting approach to a lot of different things. And he kind of came off a little bit aggressive. Obviously, he was defensive. He was frustrated, called out some very interesting, called out reporters, and didn't want to go ahead and necessarily address some questions, had issues with even terminology. The word bolstered came up when asked about bolstered about his offensive line. Sanders pushed back and said, I don't know what bolstered mean. Let's just say strengthened. But okay, but bolstered, he said, pardon me, Sanders said improved. Bolstered means strengthened, improved. Okay, same thing. But kind of an odd, a nitpicky kind of
he was in a bitchy mood.
He was in a bad mood.
I mean, he was in a bad mood. I don't know any other way to put it than that.
No.
Deion Sanders was in a bad mood, and the media ate the brunt of it.
Yeah, and they didn't. The funny thing is, Nate, and we'll have Sean Keeler of the Denver Post join us momentarily to talk about that, one of the guys that took it on the chin for the team here. But the truth of the matter is, for CU and Boulder last year they started 3-0 and got a bunch of national attention, a bunch of national news. But they finished 1-8. That's the reality.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea this year, of course, is that the hype around them a little higher. They were one of the teams receiving votes in the AP preseason poll. That puts them, I guess, technically at 42 as they received 1 vote. But this has a lot of overlap to the Broncos in so much as lots of attention paid, new names, new faces, but eventually it starts coming down to wins and losses. And I think that's the concern. I've talked about this all season long. I think that CU can get to 6 wins and get to a bowl. I think that
I think you're high.
The goal.
I think you're high if you think they can get 6 wins.
I think I
think you're nuts.
If they don't, I think there's going to be a lot of challenges in Boulder. I think there's going to be a lot of difficulties for Sanders when it comes to the media. And I got the impression, and again, we'll talk to Denver Post Sean Keeler in a moment, that has some of the, I guess, is to use Keeler's term, a whiff of fear about it. The idea that in the first year, no expectations for CU, even the 1-8 finish, right? When the team finished with 1 win the year before, you can live with 4-8. It was a big improvement. They obviously got attention. They became relevant again. Now this year, I think the expectation is moving to a new conference. They need to get to, if not a winning record, they need to at least get to 6, 500 and get to a bowl game. And if they don't, then the questions start to revolve around Deion Sanders' ability to coach as opposed to be a recruiter, and a recruiter more through the transfer portal than the high school ranks. Although it is worth noting that this year, rather than last year, the Buffs have a better haul in high school.
So I think that here's where I'm going to disagree with you. I think that I believe there is the same sort of growth, for lack of a better term, this season in joining the Big 12. This is a difficult conference. And the Pac-12 was to a certain extent as well, but this is also a very difficult conference. And I think because of that, it's going to be more challenging than you think. And I know you've got a lot to be able to talk to Sean Keeler about.
Yeah, obviously we have an opportunity to speak to Sean Keeler from the Denver Post, and you can read all the stories out there from the Post, obviously with Sean job of covering this, and the term really is covering. So Sean, thank you for joining us. And obviously things up in Boulder feeling a little bit defensive right now with Deion Sanders. Nate Lundy just talked about it as well. I think for this, the first year, obviously honeymoon period. The second year, the expectation of the Buffs need to at least make a bowl game. But that said, Sanders, I think, is feeling pressure that might not necessarily be there, because this isn't exactly, he wasn't exactly dropped into New York City or Chicago when it comes to media markets. It's not as if the folks that covering the Buffs are trying to eat him for lunch. It's been rather, I would say, a soft touch coverage for the most part.
Yeah. And Sean, thanks for having me. And you guys, thanks for having me on. I think if I were a CU fan, and this isn't how they think, as you know, and I know from social media, I'd be a little concerned about that. If I were a CU Regent, I'd be very worried about that. Like, whatever this ends in, this was never going to end well, right? It just wasn't, whatever it was going to be. So it's about, look, let's maximize the money. Let's maximize the visibility, and hopefully we maximize the talent and the wins. It's going to be those four things. And then whatever happens, happens. Hey, Rick George already said he's retiring. The AD's like, this is the last coach I'm going to hire, because he just threw his hands up in the air and said, to heck with it. Let's take whatever comes with it and let whatever happens, because going conventional for a generation hasn't worked. It was a great business move. Deion Sanders was a fabulous business move for the University of Colorado. What we don't know, and what this season is going to prove, and what we've talked about, what we're all going to write about, whether he wants us to or not, is whether the football side of it can match the expectations of where it's at. But yeah, he's had it extremely soft. And I think that's also one of the reasons he came. In fact, I know it's one of the reasons he came. And then, as you know, then when you actually have questions that don't fit a narrative or are perceived to be coming after someone, then it just highlights that even more. Everything is relative. All politics are local. When you look like the only bad guy in a room of sycophants, it can be a very, very lonely place. And I've been there.
Yeah, and you have been there, obviously. You got picked on a little bit too. And the idea that it is really tricky, because looking at the way that the media coverage works at the college level and the pro level has really changed, right? There's been sort of an influx of social media driven, internet based kind of and I mean it with absolutely no disrespect, kind of really organized fan clubs that basically pump up the message and excite the base, and that ends up being, that's totally fine, a lane in which to work. But it has blurred a little bit into some of the media, to the extent that Sanders is not even the only coach that at times, when faced with coverage that asks even questions that are not that difficult, just about wins and losses or about offseason plans or what you accomplished, that if it feels, if it doesn't hit a narrative, like you pointed out, that's confusing. And in Sanders' case, obviously he gets to come with his own army of social media people, of video production. This whole thing is the Deion Sanders special. Now, if you're CU, it was worth it because you were irrelevant. The money you've paid is totally irrelevant as well, because the money the university's made in the athletic department, and even among the student body, has made it all worthwhile. But to a certain extent, CU sort of just along for the ride, aren't they?
They are. And let me give you, it's hard to say anything about Deion, and certainly in the moment, and not sound either A, whiny, or B, sour grapes. And if you want to know what's going through the mind of that fat guy sitting there in that video that went viral, it's don't be the story, don't be the story, don't be the story, don't be the story. Because you're not.
Right.
That's not the point of what we do. Now, that's not how Deion looks at life. It's I've been the story all the time, and if I'm not, something's wrong. I get that. Like, we're just coming at it from very different perspectives. But to sum up, and this is, again, so, and I say that, don't sound whiny, don't make it about you, with an anecdote that's going to sound very whiny and not about you. This would sum up the covering Deion experience. And I think, you know, the writers there, who they've been there for a long time, and I have, and everyone there is a good soul. Even though they agree with me and may, stab me in the back or shiv me in the side, they're good souls, and I forgive them if they have. It's fine. We do what we do. But I remember one time, and I remember this exchange, and I think it was in the spring, where at some point Deion says, we have this and this and this, and our tight ends, man, you guys are saying we don't have this and this and this. You should see what we have in practice. I mean, we have this great stuff. This tight end does this and does that. And we pointed out, we can't go to practice. We can't ever observe anything. And he's like, well, you would know if you went to practice, but we can't go. We can't see this. And then he just kind of went, oh, well. And then he went away. He did a Keeler. He went away. And all I thought was, this is the fallacy of which we're dealing with. But that's whiny because Deion Sanders has, as a football coach, has always not really cared about local media. To your point, there's his inner circle comes and does their thing. And then you can buy in. We've talked about this. You can buy into the second circle, which made that exchange with CBS 4 really weird to me because he owes them. Doesn't owe me an apology. My bridges are burned. I own that. I have to own that. But Eric Christensen had nothing to do with his business beef at a higher level of something that was not even tangential to what he does. And his station is a business partner with Smack, Deion's agency. I was I mean, I was stammering at the time because I was trying to recover from that exchange, the Arnie exchange about Bolster, what have you, but he does
Arnie
that.
Stapleton, yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mentioned that before you came on. Yep.
The person in front of me who just wanted to do an Aflac commercial.
Right.
Like, press conferences should be must see if you're not there because it's a circus every time. We don't know what we're going to get. We've had moments where someone just stands up and says, Coach, I just want to say how great you are and what you've done for mankind and coaching and football in general. And that's all I've got. And then they sit down and you're like, I'm supposed to follow up with a Pat Shurmur question after that? Like, what are we doing here?
Let's play this out because there's always, even after last year, there was the idea that's it. Deion Sanders is going to be one and done and he'll buy out his contract and move on. And the presumption is by a lot of folks that he'll do it this year after Shedeur Sanders and Shiloh Sanders and probably James Hunter leave.
Yeah, they're all leaving.
There's that assumption as well. But let's play this out. So this is where I question this. One, Colorado has given him everything he wants. Everything. As you know full well, you want to talk to Deion Sanders, you talk to Deion Sanders people, not the University of Colorado.
Yeah, right.
That's unusual. A larger, more successful program that wasn't in the dire straits that Colorado was doesn't need to do that.
No.
If you're Alabama, you hire Kalen DeBoer, you're like, we're going to handle things. We're Bama. We know how to do this. You don't need to sign on that. So this idea that Deion Sanders would leave and go to a better program, where would he go? And moreover, if the Buffs don't make a bowl, let's say they don't even make a bowl, what regular top 25 program is going to want to sign on for that circus, as you put it, while the coaching acumen is still up in the air? And I quite frankly don't see a single one. So for Deion Sanders to be at one of what is now the crown jewels in a, let's just say, lesser Big 12 than it was when Texas and Oklahoma were in it, for Colorado to be a crown jewel in one of the now Power 4, and by the way, the only of the Power 4 conferences in which Colorado would be a crown jewel because of Deion Sanders. Where does he go unless this year is phenomenally successful if he wants to retain a college coach? To my mind, CU is the best place for him one way or the other.
Yeah, and you can get a copy of that contract. There are a lot of very expensive outs as well on his end, including if he would retire. And the more you think about it, like when you take a deep breath, we're all in the heat of the moment. Then you take a breath. And I've asked myself in recent months that very question. Who else would want this? And by this, I think you hire Deion Sanders if you want to make money.
Mm-hmm.
You are, to be frank, desperate. If you are, look, we've and to be fair to CU, again, that's worked. We're on the cover of SI. He's got to be the only coach maybe ever. God hope there's still a print SI. We're all in that game, knock on wood.
Right.
And 4-8 and was a sportsman of the year. If that ever happens again, I'll buy you a drink. We'll all have a good laugh at that. But to that point, that's the degree of publicity and juice and the prime effect that you get. But the football stuff, to your point, is TBD. And this season is all about proving that you take to go with the sizzle. The sizzle was a big win. It was a massive, massive win for the Buffs. But you got no stake. We have to find out what's there. And I don't think any other school would do that unless they really and even Deion has admitted Deion is, I agree with him 70% of the time, maybe 68, believe it or not, about the business side of things. And I think he's honest about that 70% of the time. He has said there are places I wouldn't go because they wouldn't give me this. Like, here are my parameters. I got my 3 YouTube feeds. I got Amazon. I got this guy. I got my On3 recruiting kid. I got this. Deion doesn't need us. And he reminds us of that every day. These are not CU people who are good folks and have always been on the level. They would be the same before this. They would, Lord willing, be the same after this. This is just a different entity dropped in here. But if it's about the football, to your point, about like, I've already got it, Alabama, Clemson, whatever, I've already got something running. They don't need Deion. They've got that built in. But you would have to be somebody further down in the pecking order that did, and he found it, and from a marketing perspective, it's been a perfect fit. It's been just big enough to give him what he wants. Although it's Deion, he's big. If he was at Rutgers, he'd be big. Big. It's not about that. But ultimately, I think what strikes me too in the bottom line from Friday and whatever else is I think Denver sports, and this is true in a lot of markets, but especially here, and you know this better than I, at some point you got to win. At some point. And I would think this is that point for this program, and I think they will. But if they don't, heaven help them, because you have friends here, but not as many as you think.
Well, and that's the part I think is interesting, Sean, because let's say they don't make a bowl game, then the best move for Deion Sanders for his career, if he wants to continue it, is to actually work hard, double down, which, I know he's doing. I'm not suggesting he's not working hard. I think there has been real progress at the University of Colorado. Mm-hmm. But you're going to have to double down and then show everyone else, if you want to continue your career, that you can coach, that you can build a team up. You got it with your sons. That's great. Now, can you do it without your sons? Can you recruit a quarterback that you need to get? Can you win with that guy? Can you prove that you can win with the guys you recruited that are not, that's not your son? If he can do that, then Deion Sanders vaults himself into a different level, and then he can start naming his plays. But until then, oddly, even though it seems like it's a bit of an uncomfortable situation at times, these two sides in the end really need each other right now, both CU and Deion Sanders.
Oh, they absolutely need this to work. Because there's no,
and that includes Sanders. This isn't just if it doesn't work for CU, Sanders can bolt and go somewhere else. Not anymore. They're tied together at the hip.
Right. This was his proving ground to say, my method, whatever 70% transfers, we don't need to develop guys. We can just grab them. We can shop Amazon Prime. We could just ship them in 24 hours, free shipping and make this work. His methods have to be proven football wise. His coaching hires have to be proven. Neither of his coordinators, Pat Shermer has a long track record. Robert Livingston I have friends in Cincinnati. I used to cover the Bengals about 30 pounds ago. They speak very highly of him. They like him. He's an energetic guy, but he's never done it at this level. We just don't know. It would be fascinating if we weren't in the middle of it, because it is going to be the experiment kicks up another notch, because the talent, to your point, is that much better. They have improved. This is, I've said it on other outlets, this is 8 or 9 win talent on paper. Mm-hmm. What we don't know is it still 4 and 5 win coaching? And then what do you get? Like, if the truth is in the middle, you go 7 and 5 as a worst case, and we see what happens. And I can see that. I think that's the most, whatever, the 90% outcome, whatever term we want to use, is likely. And if everything went right, maybe there's a 9-10 win team there, and here we go. And then it's mission accomplished. And then you have the other problem where then, to your point, then somebody bigger or richer says, come make this, come here, I need this. I want all the smoke. Give me all of it. I also can't think of many NFL teams, though, that would love that either, especially given, and I think Deion knows that too, given the parameters of the league and the CBA and how much you got to. He doesn't have control over the players and the media that level like he would here, and he just won't. He won't even deal with that as a starting point. Although the Cowboys would. Like, if anybody would just let them do whatever they wanted. Like, Shedeur Sanders grew up wanting to be a Cowboy. He didn't grow up wanting to be a Buff. Let's be real about that. They're Texans. Like, I get that too. But yeah, it's a very small window of places where that would be a fit. And to their credit, financially, they've really proven that to be a hit. And now this season's about proving it on the football side, and we will see.
Get some wins, they'll take care of itself, and the experiment will be televised. The first 3 games, national television, ESPN, NBC, and then the revamped Rocky Mountain Showdown on CBS. Can't avoid that one. Obviously, that'll be on CBS. The final game of the year at Oklahoma State's on ABC, and the rest of their schedule, both time and televised outlet, TBD. They're waiting. The nation is waiting to see what the Buffs will do after their first 3 games. You'll want to pay attention to Sean Keeler. Everything he's covering all around Colorado sports. Terrific season. All weather, all terrain writer, if you'll take that meeting. Sean Keeler joining us. So much appreciate the time, my friend.
Thank you, man.
All right. Sean Keeler joining us from the Denver Post. The Buffs have pointed out will start their 2024 schedule 2 weeks from Thursday, North Dakota State. Those first 3 games, by the way, I mentioned, all primetime night games. The attention still fixed on Boulder as the season begins. Nate Lundy comes back and joins us here over at the desk. And we're going to take a look, Nate, at the rest of, we've gone over the Broncos and how they went.
Yes.
Let's take a look at what happened in the AFC West, because the first step back for the Denver Broncos to the playoffs would be in the AFC West. Naturally, I don't think anyone's expecting, sensibly, I hope, to catch the Kansas City Chiefs. But in the preseason opener for the Chiefs, the Jaguars ended up getting the better of the 2. Jaguars 26, Chiefs 13. Patrick Mahomes 3 for 4 in his cameo appearance. It doesn't mean all that much, but the big plays in the preseason game getting done by the Jaguars, including this touchdown by C.J. Beathard to Devin Duvernay.
In NFL history in his first 2 seasons. And this one, hey, you get a little draw on your drive, and you're going to get a couple extra yards if you're a
pre-snap. Blitz is coming, turns, and he launches this one in the direction of D'Ernest Johnson, who pulls
touchdown.
it in. That's Devin Duvernay.
Good job by C.J. Beathard, putting the ball out and up.
2 teams expected to make the playoffs. The Jacksonville Jaguars now under Doug Peterson with Trevor Lawrence in that AFC South. The expectations for them are also playoff berth. One of the other teams, the Broncos, theoretically has to jump over in order to make a wild card run. What'd you see from the Jags and the Chiefs?
About, I would say what I would expect. You're talking about one team that is not really overly concerned about what they've got from a roster standpoint. Another one that I think feels pretty good in the Jaguars. Feels pretty good about what they have. Probably have a few gaps that they need to be able to fill. I think that's the case for, that's the case for a lot of NFL teams. I don't want to overstate the obvious, but I do believe that when you talk about teams that are thinking wild card, are maybe thinking division, maybe. Yeah. But for the most part of thinking wild card, you're talking about teams that have various questions that they need to be able to answer. That they, I'm a firm believer that if you went to Andy Reid right now and said, cut your entire roster and put out a depth chart, he'd be like, okay, cut all the excess dudes, and give me your 53. I think he probably could do it right here and now.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of teams that can't necessarily do that yet. And, I'll be honest with you, I think Sean Payton's probably not far from that. But
no, I don't either.
But I think the Jags had some questions to be able to answer. Look, I said it from the moment that he was drafted. I'm a Trevor Lawrence guy. I have been. And it's because of what I feel I've observed in terms of his leadership when he is in the huddle. And the leadership that I've seen him display outside of the huddle as well. So there's a lot of things that I like about the Jags. And it starts with the fact that I think Trevor Lawrence is the right person for them to have under center. And I think Doug Peterson is a good coach for him as well. I think that what came out of that preseason game was probably what we expect, right? I mean, you start to ramp things up a little bit, get to game 2, get to game 3. But I think everybody's going to protect their starters. That's why, 3 for 4.
Right.
Oh, yay, 75% completion. He's on his way to the Hall of Fame.
I mean,
he is. But I'm also just like 3 of 4. I mean, look, there were Broncos fans ready to put Bo Nix in the Ring of Honor after Sunday's game against the Colts. So, I think what we saw was what I would expect to see.
The interesting part, I think, for the Chiefs is the fact that Marquise Brown suffered get this one. The clavicle is your collarbone. Okay, we all know where that is. He didn't break it, which actually sounds bad. He dislocated it.
Yeah.
To which, where did it go? If it's not in the right no, but he's expected to be out for some time. When that happened with Tyreek Hill, he missed 4 games into the season. That matters now because Rashee Rice and Brown were considered to be the starters. Xavier Worthy as probably the 3rd wide receiver, but then you go into Justin Watson, Sky Moore, who hasn't been able to click despite his high draft pick status, Kadarius Toney, who they're using more as a running back now for the Chiefs. They're really thin at wide receiver. It's something to keep in mind. Getting rid of Tyreek Hill and still going on to win the Super Bowl is one thing, but even Patrick Mahomes can only elevate so many guys. They can't afford too many injuries on the wide receiver side.
But I will say you brought up a guy that I think, if you were going to have some sort of a takeaway from the Chiefs, it would be Xavier Worthy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Your fantasy people.
Fantasy players pay attention. And I think the number one reason for that, as was pointed out by Pro Football Focus, is he came out when the starters came out.
Yeah.
Folks, that's a
starter.
That's a big, in the first preseason game. That's a big indicator. Mm-hmm. Now, let's see what happens in the second game. Let's see what happens in the third game. But the fact that he was essentially treated as part of the first unit and came out when the first unit was done, I mean, that's basically it. They went to their backups on the second drive. He did 1 snap, the very first snap of that drive, and then he was done. This is a guy that they clearly have expectations for, or they would have kept him out there. They already know and feel that they have what they need to have out of this guy.
Yeah, and obviously if you have Patrick Mahomes throwing him the rock, things change pretty dramatically. And I don't think you worry about the Chiefs if you're Broncos fans. They're running the AFC West. They're out of reach. They're one of the reasons that a wild card's your best chance. Over in LA at SoFi Stadium on Saturday, the Chargers in Jim Harbaugh's debut. Of course, we know Justin Herbert is out with the plantar fasciitis and not playing. They ended up taking on the Seattle Seahawks. Sam Howell looks pretty good. Had a couple of scoring drives there for the Seahawks. Howell picked up from Washington. Obviously, will back up Geno Smith, at least up until Geno Smith maybe acts like Geno Smith again. A pretty wise pickup, I think, for depth for the Seahawks, but it went very well for the Chargers. We're going to give you their highlight, and I say their highlight because, well, they had one.
NFL history in his first 2 seasons. And this one, hey, you get a little draw on your drive, and you're going to get a couple extra yards. If you're a golfer, you know it. And, man, that thing had about 10 yards of draw.
Dicker the kicker, Cameron's Dicker with a 58-yarder. And that's all the offense the Chargers could muster. When all you can get is a 58-yarder, you did not do much on offense. Easton Stick, who took the start, 5 for 13 for 32 yards and a pick in 8 series. That's less than a completion of series. When asked to describe the game, he only offered a 1-word answer: frustrating.
Yeah, well, look, he's a backup quarterback for a reason. And that's what happens to teams when you don't have your starter. It happens to everyone. And that's going to be the case when it comes to Justin Herbert not being able to play right now. The Chargers have a lot of changes from an offensive standpoint, a lot of changes, and not the least of which is now you've also got a different head coach, right? I mean, the Chargers to me are
not just a head coach, a force of personality head coach.
The Chargers to me are a really interesting team to keep an eye on as we go through the NFL season. They've had to change everything about for their tight ends. They've got a completely different tight end room.
Wide receivers.
Their receivers have changed. Their head coach has changed. Their starting quarterback is hurt. They're a fascinating team to pay attention to over these next couple of games.
Chargers are one of those ones that are hard to read. On paper, you look at the talent, and though they have kind of changed over the way the receiving core worked and tight end core worked. They still have Justin Herbert. They have Jim Harbaugh. They're in, let's face it, a soft AFC West, despite Kansas City. You assume this is a team that maybe should win 10 games and get a wild card.
Well, their over-under is a flat 9. That's where it's been.
The Chargers, I think, have the most variability of almost any team in the AFC, because if Herbert's hurt for any stretch of time, this might be a 5-win team or a 4-win team. They're not that good. So it's really based on the Herbert and Harbaugh combination. So one of the teams, the Broncos, again, trying to make sure they stay ahead of. If they're going to make a run, maybe a good sign there. The last team in the AFC West, the Raiders out in Minnesota, J.J. McCarthy's debut, and McCarthy looks okay. 2 interceptions, throws a pick, gets Vikings fans excited. For the Raiders, probably the best performance of the 3 teams that we've discussed so far. Gardner Minshew, 6 for 12, 417 yards and a touchdown. But coming down to the last play of the game, you remember Alabama winning a whole bunch of football games in the last few years? Remember who the kicker was again? Will Riker? Well, NFL.
Snap spot. Right-footed Riker kick is good. And the Minnesota Vikings have walked off on the Las Vegas Raiders in the first preseason game. It's Will Reichard.
Ball game, Reichard makes the kick, expected to make a lot of those. One of the few kickers that I think when you look around and think, when kickers get drafted, why do they do that? One of the guys that could have been drafted, obviously, and gets the job done. But the Raiders' 23-24 loss on the road actually made, I thought, a pretty respectable showing, because they're the one team in the AFC West that doesn't have their quarterback situation at least temporarily settled.
Oh, come on. It's all about Minshew mania. Come on. I want Gardner Minshew.
It may very well be Minshew.
I want it to be Minshew. Come on, it'll be fun.
Everyone wants to be Minshew. People in
Come
Vegas
on.
want it to be Minshew,
Minshew's
don't they?
fun, man.
Of course they do. If you're not going to be good,
I like that guy.
And the Raiders aren't going to be good, like, be fun.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm with
you.
you.
If you won't be good, if you're not going to be good, be fun. I think one of the other stories that came out of, that came out of the Raiders contest was Brock Bowers. Obviously the tight end out of Georgia that was drafted right behind Bo Nix in the first round by the Raiders. I found it really interesting, going back and looking at some of the usage that he had. Man, they put him everywhere.
Yeah.
They put him in the backfield. They put him as an outside wide receiver. They moved him all over the offensive formation.
And Devontae Adams didn't play, so when he was out there, he wasn't getting any help there as well, because Adams was not playing in that game.
Yeah, Bowers is an incredible athlete. I actually have to give a little bit of a hat tip to the Raiders, to the fact that they are lining him up all over the place.
Yeah.
Normally that's not something you do in the preseason. You wait and show people that once you get into the regular season, but take advantage of this guy and use his athletic ability to cause defensive coordinators a little bit of a headache.
Well, if you're talking about at least draft pedigree, and you're talking about what he accomplished in college, I think you look at Brock Bowers and you say, is it impossible for him to reach the Kelsey Kittle level of tight end play? Not really. Sam Laporta. I think he's that kind of guy. Hawkinson, those very top tier tight ends. I think Bowers is going to eventually be one of those guys. You're right. Pretty bold by Antonio Pierce to maybe try that. But then again, if Bowers is as good a player as he looks like he might be, who cares if people know? If at any point the Chiefs decided to put Travis Kelce as a weird fullback alignment, everyone's going to be like, well, that's an interesting hand of tipping your hand. But then again, what are you going to do about it? It's fascinating, and the Raiders will be fascinating. They're not expected to be very good. Congratulations to McCarthy, by the way. He didn't have starting running back Aaron Jones or, of course, Justin Jefferson, because they're playing it utterly safe with their, of course, very, very expensive wide receiver. But the Raiders give it a run. But that means you noticed, by the way, the Denver Broncos, the only team in the AFC West with a win, and their quarterback,
let's go.
Their top pick this year found their top pick last year in maybe the game's best play.
Going to this.
Nix throws, touchdown. Touchdown grab for Denver. Marvin Mims Jr. on the touchdown reception.
Yeah, boy, did he get rid of that ball in a hurry.
As you described that throw yesterday, a dart from
Super Bowl
Nix to Mims. and a good RPO read as well. So for the Broncos, obviously the only team in the AFC West to win a preseason game. That doesn't mean anything. Ask the Los Angeles Lakers about their in-season tournament thing that they got. Nobody cares about anymore. Maybe they'll win another one. That means about the same as NFL preseason wins. But it is a good sign for the Broncos to get the win. It's a good sign to generate 34 points. And when the other teams in your division seem to be having a couple challenges here and there, you're never rooting for injuries, obviously, but they do happen. And for the Chargers and now the Chiefs with Marquise Brown, those are challenges. And those challenges that they have, if the Broncos can avoid those pitfalls, that's an opening for them to succeed. So a lot to keep in touch with regarding the AFC West, and we'll continue to do that, of course, every week as the season goes along, as long as the Broncos can stay relevant and in it. But want to remind you that, of course, other sports are around the corner. The Colorado Rockies are still going on. Their bullpen is still bad, as witnessed last night. But we appreciate that every single one of you that subscribe to this show. We really appreciate all of it, and we know that it's great to have it so it fits your schedule. That's what we tried to do here. It's why we're switching over and having it in this format as well, so you can enjoy the show whenever you want to enjoy it. But there are plenty of other podcasts on the audio side that you can listen to as well for deeper dives into your favorite teams. Ryan Blackburn keeps you up to date with what's happening in the Nuggets, and the Pickaxe and Roll podcast. By the way, Nikola Jokic, first player in the history of the Olympics to lead the Olympic basketball tournament in points, rebounds, assists, and steals. So you'll want to stay on top of that with the Nuggets, and that's what Ryan Blackburn does with Pickaxe and Roll. Arif Dean's always on the ice with the Colorado Avalanche. Check out his podcast, Hockey Mountain High. The Avs making some recent moves as well in their defensive core, looking pretty deep. We'll find out if that rolls around soon enough. And Mile High baseball fans know they can get the latest on the Rockies with Drew Kreisman and the 20th and Blake podcast. And for even more on the Broncos, yeah, we got you covered. You want to know whether Bo Nix will be the answer? Well, we're all going to find out together, but you can get a head start on it. Get the latest with the Broncos and more with the Broncos podcast with Troy Rank. Our friend from the Denver Post is featured right here on the Mile High Sports Podcast Network. All that and much, much more. Just search Mile High Sports wherever you get your podcast, and you will have a plethora of options to choose from to make sure you're up to date.
A plethora of pinatas.
See, I set you right up for that. That was my John Stockton. Right up to your
have
Karl
a
Malone.
plethora of pinatas.
Exactly. Well,
I got you a sweater.
plethora of pinatas. That's an interesting way of describing the. Sean Payton said called them orphan dogs. So plethora of pinatas might actually be better.
That might work. Can we touch on one thing with the Buffs that you were talking about?
Yeah,
Keeler, real quick.
absolutely.
Before I know this is we're wrapping up the show here, our final segment.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something right before Shawn joined you, and you were talking about the win totals that they needed, the expectation of the win totals. I told you I think you're nuts. I don't think they're going to win 6 games. I don't think they're going to a bowl game. I think the Big 12 is too good. I think, frankly, when I looked at the schedule last year, when their over under on wins was 3.5.
Right.
I believed
we all jumped on that.
Yeah, I believed in the over, but part of the reason I believed in the over was because of the opponents that they had at home and what I thought they could manage to do. Obviously, they got the job done against TCU. That was a big deal. And that was a big deal towards that 4th win.
Yes,
right?
Probably
Even
not
though
one that a lot.
beginning.
They were a 20-point underdog in that game. Turns out TCU was not as good as people thought, but it was a surprise.
When I think about the Buffs and I think about their schedule, I mean, okay, maybe you can feel meh about the first 3.
You got 5 ranked teams in the preseason top 25 on your schedule.
But you could so you're going to start off with North Dakota State. Good Lord, if you lose that. Okay.
There's a problem. Yeah.
Then you got to go to Lincoln. Right now, Nebraska is about as Jekyll and Hyde as it gets.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the hell to expect out of that team. Okay. And neither do Husker fans. And folks, I was born in Nebraska, so I've got a lot of family that are Husker fans, and they don't even know what the heck's going on. And they're trying like hell to stay positive, and it's not really working. Then you go to Fort Collins. All right.
A game CU should have lost at home last year. Should have lost.
So let's say you start out 3-0. Then you go Baylor, UCF, K-State, Arizona, Cincinnati, Texas Tech, Utah. Like, I'm trying to figure out where there are 6 wins.
The conference schedule's brutal. UCF is on Baylor's at home. UCF is on the road at 8. They have K-State at 18 right now coming in. They go to Arizona at 21.
And 3 of the ranked teams that you have to play, you're getting at home.
Right.
Like it's not even like you can sit back and say, okay, maybe we can take advantage of Folsom. We can take advantage of the altitude,
K-State,
a good
Utah,
crowd.
Oklahoma State, all in the Folsom.
I mean, of the 6 home games, the 3 of them that are sitting there against ranked teams, that's you're going to be lucky to be 3-3 at home.
Yes.
Which means
absolutely.
Which then means you have to go 500 on the road. That's why I'm saying I'm not buying the bowl game. And I'm not buying 6 wins.
And that does make sense. You know, when you're talking about
now, a whole lot could change between,
Sure.
you know, by the time you play Oklahoma State at the end of the season.
Yeah, when a
right?
full half of your home schedule is against ranked teams,
You know,
well,
I mean,
you're
the
gonna have
Cowboys
to
could
beat a
fall on
ranked
their
team and
face.
beat everybody else. But you're right, teams can fall on their face. But
So I just,
it's going to be tough.
I just wanted to get
I
back
think
to
6 is quite frankly their ceiling. But I think it's
yeah,
within the realm of
and I think
possibility.
and I think 5 is the ceiling, and that's getting lucky somewhere. I think that's pulling something
then
off.
that would be fascinating.
It
What
would
the
be-
offseason in Boulder will be.
See, and
Absolutely
and here's the thing: I'm not convinced that it would be.
So this was my argument with Keeler. I think if they don't make a bowl, Deion Sanders at this point has no choice. You have to stay in Boulder.
I don't think
You
he's
have to
going anywhere.
Prove that that you can coach without your son.
I believe.
I think he also knows he's got it pretty good here.
This is just a gut feel. I don't have anything to go off of other than a gut feel. Okay. I do not believe Sanders is going anywhere. I believe he will coach in Boulder. I can't tell you for how long. And I think if he decides he's done in Boulder, he's done.
Yeah. I agree.
I mean, that's what I think is happening. I don't believe why wouldn't you right now allow yourself to be from a coaching standpoint, the biggest deal in the Big 12 and be the biggest fish in a somewhat smaller pond
of only 4 conferences that matter.
Yes. It's not a Power 5 anymore. It's Power 4.
How are you going to get better than that in short order?
And so there's
By
not
starting over somewhere else.
Unless for some reason he wants to be coaching the Seminoles. Right?
And the Seminoles want that.
But beyond that, you own Boulder.
Right.
You own it. You are the one coach at Media Day that everybody wants to hear from. Right? You are the equivalent of all the times that New England was in the Super Bowl and media night would happen when we would travel, like for Radio Row and things like that. Everybody gathered around Gronk.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were usually bigger crowds to talk to Gronk than there were to talk to Tom Brady. And it was because you never knew what he was going to say. He was going to be a little bit goofy. He was a likable guy, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Right now, that's what Deion has served to him on a black and gold platter. And he can write his own checks.
Yep.
He can do whatever he wants.
He has reportedly turned down
and he's got an NIL. And by the way, he's got an NIL group that's got 8 figures worth of money in the bank.
Right. And you don't want to start that over again. So, and remember, any players who transfer to Colorado with him, were he to leave after next year, cannot transfer out. So I'm with you. I said from the day he was hired, I said, I think there's at least 4 years in which Deion Sanders is going to coach in Boulder at minimum, because if he's intent on being an actual coach as his career, you have to go through and show I can recruit guys that aren't just related to me. I can win with those guys. And then he can pick a spot. Turning down the contract offer from Colorado was sort of perceived as something I think bigger than it was. Colorado understood how much money he's making for the university, that the $40 million max that he get all 5 years plus incentives was easily already exceeded. They wanted to tear it up and give him more money. Sanders wanted to wait because obviously if he takes the team to a bowl game this year, if he does, then he can come back to see you and say, yeah, that plus more, and they'll do it. And both sides know it, because CU'd be happy to pay it and Deion Sanders would be happy to get it. But starting over, I'm with you, Nate. I think there is this weird panic idea that just because Deion Sanders likes the spotlight, you have the Stephen A. Smiths of the world saying he's got to go to USC. Lincoln Riley's still at USC. And we did that a couple weeks ago. Looked at Lincoln Riley's career record. They're going to dump Lincoln Riley, the Trojans, for Deion Sanders. Are they that desperate yet? I mean, Riley's won like 70% of his games there. So where's he really going to go until he proves he can coach? So right now, he and CU need each other, and they need to go ahead and play this out. And for Sanders, I agree with you. If he gets the Buffs to be a regular bowl team and an occasional top 25 team, and by the way, his force of personality will help and get them in the preseason rankings here and there. Why would you leave? Because out of the Big 12, that no longer has Texas and Oklahoma. Colorado, they're looking for someone. Right now, the national narrative is, well, Utah or Kansas can come out of it, which instead of people being excited about, they're like, oh, Utah or Kansas.
Big 12 is a lot more exciting for basketball.
Yeah, because we know, it's the best basketball conference in the country.
It's the best basketball conference in the country.
But for football, they're looking for a face with Texas and Oklahoma gone. And the truth is that Colorado could actually be that face. And could you imagine the shortcut from being a 1-11 school to only a handful of years later being considered the top dog in one of the Power 4 conferences? That would almost be ludicrous, but it's actually even possible. And that's why I think you're right. Sanders, in the end, understands that what he has is no real downside and all upside at Colorado, a program that has already been happy to basically tell him, whatever you want to do, we're cool with. You want to run things yourself, that's fine. You don't want to have to report to the AD when it comes to doing media, no problem. You want to have your own people on the sideline filming things, great. You want to personally invite Lil Wayne to run out with Ralphie, knock yourself out. How many other schools that have a better program than CU are going to do that? Ohio State doesn't need that. Notre Dame doesn't need that. Bama doesn't need that. They don't need those things. Sanders is in a great place. I suspect he knows it, but he's got to get the wins. And now that's the tricky part.
He also has a massive ego.
Of course. Always has. He's primetime.
So why in the world, if you have a massive ego, would you want to bail the moment your son is gone?
Which makes it look like it was him and not you.
Just saying, folks.
To do, and that's the thing, to do what?
Exactly.
To do what?
He's not going anywhere.
He's not going to coach in the pros, except for, I guess, maybe the Cowboys would be crazy enough to do it, but I don't even think that's the case.
I told
he knows
you.
He won't coach in the pros.
I am convinced that he is not going anywhere.
I agree.
That outside of Jackson State, that he is not going to coach anywhere else in college football.
2 FBS schools reportedly offered Deion Sanders their coaching job. The University of Cincinnati, now currently a Big 12 rival, and Colorado. And Colorado was the only one that gave him a $7 to $8 million pool for assistant coaches, because the assistant coaches run game day for Deion Sanders. And the fit is good. So the fit is good. Perhaps some of the frustration with Sanders could relax, because he is, let's face it, I'm from this state.
A bad day.
This is a media market in which you have a pretty supportive group. They're not looking to tear you down. It's not East Coast. They're not looking to go, oh, that guy's an idiot every morning, like you'll hear on East Coast radio. That's not really how Colorado functions.
Yeah, Sean Keeler is not Howard Eskin, okay?
No,
he's not.
And in the end, I think everyone will come to realize that. So it's a good opportunity. Let's see what they do in a couple of weeks. The Broncos will be at it this week. They'll be back out at training camp on Wednesday, with the Packers coming in for joint practices prior to the game. One will be back at it tomorrow. Nate, out at Dove Valley. What do you want to see with presumably Bo Nix now ready to start the second game? Is it going to look, you think, in the next 3 days like Bo Nix, in deed, if not word, already is the Broncos starting quarterback?
I don't know what I want to see tomorrow. I want to see that drill where they throw the kitchen towels at him again. I like
that if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball.
I like that one. I like the one where they do the diving thing and then they land on the mat.
Yep.
I mean, it's kind of like artistic gymnastics.
Well, you got to learn how to land so you don't hurt yourself.
I kind of like that. I don't know, Sean. I don't know what I'm looking for tomorrow. I think I want to fast forward to September 8th so badly right now that I'm tolerating the rest of it.
You are not alone with that, but the Broncos don't have that luxury. They need.
I mean, I'm ready for the abs to start, for crying out loud. I would take October right now if I could get it.
Well, we have to wait a little bit for that, obviously, but the Broncos do need every practice they can get if they're going to make any noise this year, or even get themselves into a spot where they can match their record from last year. We will stay. I'd be picking real high.
4
wins.
5 if they get lucky.
Yeah, I had them at 5.
Play the under.
Prove us wrong, Broncos. We'd love to see it. I'd love to be wrong about that. Nothing would make me happier. We'll find out when we get out there this week. We'll see if Bo Nix is in charge. Obviously, he's expected to start in this game against the Packers, but the Packers not expected to start any of their starters. So it remains to be seen what we will learn. Thanks to Sean Keeler for joining us from the Denver Post. Always good to talk to him. And yeah, if he's right, if you ever want to turn on a Deion Sanders press conference, Sean Keeler will be there, and he will probably be catching a little flack. So, make sure you follow Shawn. Terrific writer for the Denver Post. Danny Bailey's the man in the booth there that makes everything, or it's not really a booth, since we're in a big studio, but you get what I mean. He's the guy that runs everything and makes it work. Thanks to Nate Lundy, of course, for sitting in again. Always appreciate it. We will be back out tomorrow at Dove Valley as Broncos practice gets underway. For everyone here at Mile High Sports, I'm Sean Drotar. Thanks for listening.